Welcome to Flourishing in Medicine from Surviving to Thriving. I'm your host, Dr. Mick Krasner, and this podcast is brought to you by EmPro Insurance Company, which is a professional medical liability insurance carrier headquartered in New York State. EmPro has a variety of peer support and educational offerings that are designed to support the physicians they protect.
Empathy comes from Greek, ancient Greek, pratos, that means be in the emotions. N is in and pathos is emotions. So it really means I'm in the emotion of the person that is in front of me. And this is a beautiful capacity, as you said, it is innate and we can also improve, right? Because this makes us able to resonate with others, to understand cognitively, and also feel it. But as you said, when we over-empathize, we put ourselves in the story of the others, we start to feel the same suffering of the person that is with us. And when we do this, there are two things that can happen. One, we get overwhelmed, and so we need as well help. We cannot provide help for the others. Or two, in order to not to have that, we become cold, and so we step back. And this can be felt by patients, but anyone that feel that we are cold and distant. While with compassion, it has a Latin roots from cum patior, that means suffering with. I'm with the person who is suffering. It is not me. I can be sad because the person with me is suffering, but I don't suffer at the same way as the other one is suffering. And at the same time, I have this movement, I have this motivation to help the other. Where in empathy, we don't have this driving force to help the other. It's more, I understand what you are feeling, I feel what you feel.
My guest today is Dr. Lia Antico. She is a neuroscientist, an educator, and a contemplative scholar whose work explores the neural and behavioral mechanisms underlying burnout, empathy, and compassion in health professionals. Lia's journey began with a deep curiosity about how the body and brain work, and was profoundly shaped by her volunteer experiences in hospitals and by her Christian contemplative tradition, in particular within the Jesuit practice of contemplation in action. After completing her PhD in neuroscience, she moved into translational research at Brown University, where she developed and tested brief, evidence-based mindfulness interventions shown to significantly reduce anxiety and burnout in clinicians. She now continues her work, research, and training in Switzerland while maintaining collaborations at Brown in the United States. Lia is helping to build curricula and clinical spaces where awareness, compassion, and flourishing can take root. This is a thoughtful and inspiring conversation from science, spirit, and the human capacity to transform suffering into meaningful action. And now my conversation with Dr. Lia Antico. Well, Lia, welcome to Flourishing in Medicine from Surviving to Thriving. It's just a great pleasure to have you in conversation with me today.
Thank you, Mick, for the invitation. I feel really honored, and always a pleasure to talk with you.
So in a little bit, I'd like you to describe in some detail the path that you've taken to do the kind of research that you do. But before that, for us to understand you, Lia Antico, a little better, I'd like you to share not the what that you do, but the why. Specifically, why have you devoted all this professional training and efforts toward understanding burnout and anxiety, especially among health professionals, kind of underneath the scientific intrigue or curiosity? What is it about you that has you doing this kind of work?
Thanks for the question. So I'm really interested in, first of all, growing in well-being and wisdom. So try a way to live fully my life. And I want to share this with others. And the population that I found really interesting that can allow to do this on themselves and others is physicians, nurses, and all people that work in clinics and hospitals. Because I believe that if I can support them to flourish, to reduce their burnout, their anxiety, I can help also their patients and the families of the patients. So really I'm eager to make feel people better and live their life fully. Personally, I was always really interested in medicine, understand how my body, my mind work. And so I started to study through the university human biology. And my favorite subject was anatomy and physiology. I really loved to look at carefully how the body is, how the body works. And then through neuroscience, specifically in the brain, I was really interested in that. And at the same time, I was really curious and passionate of the interaction between people and clinicians and patients. And so during my undergraduate, I did a lot of volunteer in the hospitals. So once a week, I was with people in the ambulances, go all over the places to provide support. And I clearly remember a few interactions with patients, especially they were telling me they were having difficulties with their nurses, with their physicians, because they were distant and cold. And this, in a way, stayed with me. And also, I had the chance to go to the Pediatric Unit and to play with children and realize that even if they are sick, they were full of energy. And even just 1 hour spending with them, I can still remember how much then tired I was, afterwards. And this was a good sign. And so I would say I started by being interested in knowing more how the body and the mind work. And then this relationship with people was very dear to me. For this, I oriented my research more into cognitive and affective aspect. I'm really fascinated by emotions and emotional competencies that we can improve in ourselves, in the interaction with others. And at the same time, in my spiritual path, I became really interested in contemplative practices. And this was really helpful for me, not only to nourish my faith, my spiritual life, but also to nourish my professional life, because it helped me to make decisions that were aligned to where I am, and also to explore my experience in the 4 dimensions of mind, body, heart, and spirit. And so thanks to these two, would say, approach, so curiosity and science and contemplation, that I built my daily work. So I try to support clinicians with their well-being and the well-being of their patients through attention of their own experience in these 4 dimensions. I hope it's more clear.
You said something that really raised my attention, curiosity, and it had to do with when you were describing the work you did in the Pediatric Unit and the description of all the energy that you saw, even in the children who were quite ill. And although you described also being fatigued and tired after spending some time with them, you also, the way you spoke showed me that there was also this energizing quality. I'm not sure how to form this question. It's more just like you to speak a little bit about the personal impact of being around that kind of energy and any connection between that energizing effect and how you think about the future work that you got yourself into in terms of, I would say, energizing, elevating, lifting people who are having struggles, say burnout in their work life, to a higher level, to a level that gives them hope and gives them a sense of meaning and purpose and ability to continue to do the work. Yeah, what was that personally like for you to be both fatigued and energized, and how does it connect to your work?
Yeah, it was coming back to why I was doing that, why I was there. I wanted to be present with them. And being present, I also was interacting with them. And so feeling their energy, their life. And this helped me to reboost my energy. So my values, why I was doing that, and how deep for me means to be in relationship with others. It can be others in need or maybe not others. And this is something that I have to say all my contemplative path helped me a lot to discern and understand. Because when I was very young, even in high school, I had this thought that I wanted to help people that were not doing well. So let's say patients, for example. But then by doing this path, I said, no, we can provide support to everyone, not only when we are not doing well, but even people around us that maybe are not in the hospital. And this was kind of, for me, eye-opening, that in any circumstance, we can provide support and being supported, because, as I was saying, I was receiving a lot back when I was interacting with those children, for example, as you mentioned, the Pediatric Unit, but it's the same when I interact with students. When we meditate together, or even when, in school, that they ask me questions and they show me their curiosity and their passion. So I think the key is to be present in the two ways. Is very interesting. Be present means also being like a gift, right? Being a gift for the others and being a gift for yourself.
And I'm wondering if you could now, Lia, walk us through the what that you do in terms of studying the behavioral and the neural mechanisms that underlie burnout. You're in a unique position as a guest. Most of our guests have focused careers on clinical work and some other types of work, but on addressing aspects of burnout and well-being. You're in a position to do that, as well as look under the hood, so to speak, to really try to understand what's beneath or what's driving that experience of burnout, or what is it phenomenologically. So tell us, what you do in terms of studying these mechanisms.
So my PhD in neuroscience gave me the tools to, for example, help and discover more what's happening in the brain when we suffer, or when we are specifically when we are empathetic with others that are suffering. This was the topic of my PhD thesis. So what are the networks involved in the brain when we are in empathy with others? And then I shift a little bit my domain or my field of research in translational research, because I want not only to understand what's happening in the brain, but how this information can support people. And for example, how can support clinicians to be more flourished in well-being. And so for this, I came to Brown 4 years ago to learn more how to run randomized controlled trials and to develop from scratch interventions with them. So that is not that we tested if the intervention was effective once it was developed, but we developed with our users, so with physicians, with nurses, with psychologists, the interventions that was meeting their needs and that was feasible, because we know that they are very busy in their life. So sometimes we can build this very amazing programs, but then they are not feasible, so people cannot have access to them because they are so busy in their life. So this was one of the key learn from my experience at Brown. So to develop a program with the people that will benefit from it.
Yeah, we might as well go there. Can you describe a little bit about those programs? They're kind of novel ways of training and applying mindfulness to relieve burnout, anxiety, and some other aspects that can fit into people's lives. So I think our listeners would be really curious about that, both just from a curiosity point of view, but also they would like to participate or partake in that once it becomes more widely available, if it's shown to be effective. So maybe describe some of the work you've done in that and some of the findings thus far.
So we developed an audio course that is also free available on an app that is called Unwinding by ShareCare. And the audio course is called From Burnout to Resilience. It includes 7 modules of 15 minutes each. And we wanted to make, as I said, this intervention really short and feasible. So for this, we really kept the modules short. And the 3 main ingredients of these modules are real-life stories. So we report stories shared by clinicians. And sometimes also when they agreed, we record their voice so that people can hear their story from, the people that wanted to share it. Then we wanted to include pragmatic exercises, so short exercises that people could do it in their practice when they were working or even at home. And third, once we wanted to also make evidence from science. So what science says about burnout, empathy fatigue, compassion, because we know that this will resonate with people that we listen to. And so we started by, writing the scripts of those audio, but then we asked 40 clinicians to read those scripts and gave us feedback if those scripts were, meeting their needs, if they were clear enough, and if they were feasible, the exercises that we wanted to suggest to them to do it. And after this, say, 2 rounds of refinement of the program, we tested the program in 4 cohorts, 2 cohorts of physicians, 1 nurses, and 1 cohort of residents. And it was really promising for us to see that already after usually 15, 20 days of intervention, because we asked them, you have all the time that you want to listen to those modules. And we encourage them to not rush in listening to the modules and implementing the exercises, but to do slowly and do it in their practice. And we saw that on average, participants took 15, 20 days to complete all the modules. And we saw that after that, they report lower anxiety, lower burnout in the 2 dimensions of depersonalization and emotional exhaustion of even 30%, so 30% less of burnout and 40% less of anxiety. And this was maintained even when we test again after 1 month of follow-up. And at the same time, we saw that also they reported increased compassion towards themselves, increased non-reactivity, so that when they are in a challenging situation, they were not jumping into the reaction, but they were taking the time to respond to the situation that was happening. And also they became more tolerant towards uncertainty, because we know that uncertainty, especially in medicine, is intrinsic. And so with our module, we really try to help them to see already what are the behaviors that were not adaptive. And so to replace those behaviors, like, for example, rumination, bringing too much work at home, how they could, or over-empathizing with their patients, and how to replace those behaviors with bigger, better offer. For example, to be more compassionate than too much empathetic with their patients. And this means really try to be present and help them without fusing their own story with the story of their patients. So it's really, we encourage them to remove the me from the stories of their patients, not overwhelmed by their suffering and suffer too. Because and this maybe sometimes we do the experience when even a friend is sharing his difficulties or is suffering. If we start to put ourselves in the story of the people that is with us, we start to feel the same emotions and we start to suffer as well, so that we are not available to be there to support them. So this way, we try to unpack and show the difference that even science, this is really beautiful that in a study in 2013, researchers were able to dissociate even in the brain the response to empathy for pain and compassion for pain. So there were two different networks in the brain active when they were empathetic or when they were compassionate. And then we try to, this from the cognitive level, but then also experiential, how we can do that, how you can see it and recognize in your own practice when you are maybe too much empathetic or when you are compassionate.
I'm curious about this empathy and compassion discussion. And just for a moment, if we can go off on a tangent, I had done some writing with an empathy researcher some years ago, Dr. Eve Ekman. One of the things that and we've understood is that empathy is kind of an already inborn capacity. It's instantiated very early. In fact, newborns have it. And so when we encounter experiences, there is an empathic resonance, at least emotionally and probably cognitively, that occurs. And you're describing these separate networks related to empathy and compassion. And then you mentioned empathy fatigue or just being over empathic. And in kind of our writings, we talked about how one could have that emotional empathic resonance and then get overwhelmed or feel aversion for, but that, and you actually used words like see it, understand it, but with awareness, we have that space between that thing that already happens naturally, where we have empathy, we're born with it. It's going to happen. In that awareness, we can then choose kind of how to take action. We can choose the compassionate action. Maybe you can say more about how those two networks can connect through awareness, as I've maybe poorly described, but maybe you can clarify it a little bit.
I always found helpful to start from the etymology of the words. Empathy comes from Greek, ancient Greek, pathos, that means be in the emotions. N is in and pathos is emotions. So it really means I'm in the emotion of the person that is in front of me. And this is a beautiful capacity, as you said, that is innate and we can also improve, right? Because this makes us able to resonate with others, to understand cognitively and also feel it. But as you said, when we over-empathize, we put ourselves in the story of the others, we start to feel the same suffering of the person that is with us. And when we do this, there are two things that can happen. One, we get overwhelmed. And so we need as well help. We cannot provide help for the others. Or two, in order to not to have that, we become cold. And so we step back. And this can be felt by patients, but anyone that feel that we are cold and distant. So these are the two responses of over empathy. And from the brain is really what they saw, that when they were looking at people in videos sharing their suffering, the network that was active in the brain was the same network when you feel suffering in the first place. It was the anterior insula, dorsolateral cortex, anterior cortex. And so is the same when you feel the pain, because you put yourself in the story of the other. While with compassion, it has a Latin root from cum patior, that means suffering with. I'm with the person who is suffering. It is not me. I can be sad because the person with me is suffering, but I don't suffer at the same way as the other one is suffering. And at the same time, I have this movement, I have this motivation to help the other. Where in empathy, we don't have this driving force to help the other. It's more, I understand what you are feeling, I feel what you feel. So empathy comes from Greek, ancient Greek, pathos, that means be in the emotions. N is in, and pathos is emotions. So it really means I'm in the emotion of the person that is in front of me. And this is a beautiful capacity, as you said, that is innate, and we can also improve, right? Because this makes us able to resonate with others, to understand cognitively, and also feel it. But as you said, when we over-empathize, we put ourselves in the story of the others, we start to feel the same suffering of the person that is with us. And when we do this, there are two things that can happen. One, we get overwhelmed. And so we need as well help. We cannot provide help for the others. Or two, in order to not to have that, we become cold. And so we step back. And this can be felt by patients, but anyone that feel that we are cold and distant. So these are the two responses of over empathy. And from the brain is really what they saw, that when they were looking at people in videos sharing their suffering, the network that was active in the brain was the same network when you feel suffering in the first place. It was the anterior insula, dorsolateral cortex, anterior cortex. And so is the same when you feel the pain, because you put yourself in the story of the other. While with compassion, it has a Latin root from cum patior, that means suffering with. I'm with the person who is suffering. It is not me. I can be sad because the person with me is suffering, but I don't suffer at the same way as the other one is suffering. And at the same time, I have this movement, I have this motivation to help the other. Where in empathy, we don't have this driving force to help the other. It's more, I understand what you are feeling, I feel what you feel. So I hope this clarifies a little bit. And in the brain, what they saw that when people were compassionate, there were other regions, not the anterior insula or the anterior cingulate cortex active, but more regions like orbitofrontal cortex or ventral striatum that we know are also active when we feel unconditional love or we feel reward.
Lia, I'd like to shift a little bit about your current opportunities. You have left Brown after 4 years or so, and you now are in Fribourg, Switzerland, at the university there. And maybe just tell us about these opportunities that you look forward to in this continuing unfolding of your career.
To be honest, I'm still connected with Brown because we have projects that are ongoing. Like we have this randomized controlled trial with physicians. And I also hold a position at Brown and as an adjunct. And I continue the work that I was doing at Brown. But as you said correctly, now I'm in Switzerland, and I, through research and teaching, try to support students, medical students from their bachelor to their master degree, and then to residency and beyond. So when they are already working full-time in clinics or in the hospitals. So for the research, we are developing a curriculum for residents, specifically for residents in internal medicine, help them to reduce, again, their stress, their anxiety, and to improve their sense of well-being and flourishing in the work that they do and also in their life, because the two are connected, right? And also we have this big cohort in Switzerland that we are following in a longitudinal study and taking pictures of how they do for 5 years. So we look at all these variables in 10 different centers in Switzerland. And from the research, this is from the research, and for the teaching perspective, we really want to bring more of all we said, awareness, more attention to the experience in the 4 dimensions that I explained earlier, and to get students sensitive and having also the access to those experiences while they are already in the school, and prepare themselves to when they will then go to the clinic. And so we have already a course called Mind-Body Medicine for the bachelor, and it's something that we want to also provide with other levels for older students, so when they are in their master degree.
Yeah, thank you. You know, for many of our listeners who are in North America, the bachelor's, let me just translate, in the master's in the Swiss system and many other European and other systems outside the United States, the medical degree happens in 2 phases. The first, you could say, is equivalent to the first 2 years of our traditional medical school training, what they call the bachelor's. And the master's is more the clinical side of the training, or what would happen in the last 2 years of our 4-year medical curriculum. So just a little translation there. Lia, could you just talk a little bit about contemplation and action? It's something that you think about and you integrate into your work. And tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, thanks, Mick. Is really dear to me, this aspect of contemplation. As I said before, I'm really passionate and grateful for all I learned through these contemplative practices that are there from traditions that are so old, right? They are 1,000 years old. And so those practices help me to understand more how my mind works, also how I behave. And this is amazing, is already, really insightful. And it doesn't stop there. So for me, it should be integrated in the life that we live and in the actions and how we behave with others. So for this, I think that contemplation is wonderful when it's accompanied by action. So what we learn from our experience, so how we behave, how we respond to things, help us to translate those things in what we do for our work, for our life, in our relationships. So it's really putting into actions all the fruits and the insights that we can get when we are meditating or we are practicing, even in the informal way, those techniques. Yeah.
You mentioned it earlier, and I know that faith has informed your, not just your personal life, but your professional life, and you have ideas about how to integrate that in to the work you do. If you wouldn't mind, I would like to just hear a little bit more about that, about how you see that and anything you may have planned.
Yeah, thanks. And this can be also maybe interesting, who knows, for people that are hearing us or seeing us, that I arrived to mindfulness not through Buddhism or through science, as often we hear about, but I arrived mainly through my Christian faith. And I also very eager to let other people discover that those practices are present in every tradition. Okay, and, of course, we learned a lot from Buddhism, from Zen, from all the Eastern cultures, but also in the Western traditions, we have a big space for contemplation and contemplative practices. And so the first time that I meditate and, for example, did even a body scan or a walk with five senses meditation was in my faith. I'm Christian and I'm interested in what the Jesuits, that is the order in the Catholic Church, founded by St. Ignatius of Loyola, taught me. It was really here in Fribourg 13 years ago when I did this retreat and I did my first body scan, as I said. I did my first five senses walking meditation. And these practices helped me a lot to nourish my interior life, my spiritual life, to notice more what is happening in my experience in the four dimensions, not only appreciate what a spiritual text is saying to my mind, but also how it resonates in my body and how to make decisions, so how to discern options you have in your life or decisions that you have to make in your life by taking into account those four dimensions, not only what the mind is saying, but also what the body, what the heart are saying. And so this is something that I learned through a spiritual path. And in fact, Ignatius of Loyola was a big fan of contemplation in action. For him, praying and contemplating were, of course, very important for his faith, his relationship with God, but also were informing how to interact with others, how to support others. So it was one of the, support that all this contemplation in action. And so for this, I say that those practices helped me even professionally because they helped me to discern what was the path in my career that was more aligned with my values, with my nature, how I am. And at the same time, I was seeing the more and more in scientific papers the word mindfulness. And when I got curious and I started to look more what this mindfulness is, what are those mindfulness-based interventions, I found so many parallels for what I was learning in my spiritual life through the Jesuits and what I was reading in those scientific papers. This attention to the present moment, to here and now, was similar. This attention to what's happening in your body and heart also was present. In another retreat, I had this insight that meditation for me could be the bridge from my personal spiritual life and my professional life. And so I tested and retested that intuition that I had that day. And I could see that every time that I was all meditating with others or alone, or I was even reading something about meditation or listening to someone speaking, or even myself talking about those experiences, I felt this sense of being aligned, of being alive. And this for me was not only from a cognitive point of view, but from my whole experience, the answer that path was the path for me. And this is the proof because, 13 years passed and I'm still very interested and passionate and grateful for having taken those decisions. And so I want really to foster the discovery and to create spaces where people can discover those things, can have a little experience, and then choose if they want to deepen more their practice or not. And so this is something that I did it at Brown, by my teaching. So I was teaching neuroscience of meditation. And also, as I said to you, I really wanted people to know about those practices in every tradition. And so as I'm a Christian, I suggested that the students loved to study and to experience those practices from the Christian tradition, and also to provide a space where firsthand we can experience those practices in both secular and spiritual settings.
I think listening to you, what's so helpful is that it allows our listeners to really think for themselves about building that bridge between the personal and professional. Many of us would love to do that and feel less fragmented and more whole. However, we decide to do that. And your story really is a great description of how that was for you. And it can be a model for how people want to think about building that bridge because, they're never really separate to begin with. So we're winding down. I just wanted to ask you one more question to share. Based on your work and your approach, your experiences, maybe if you could just think about a vision, what is your vision for human potential as it relates to the work you're doing for health, professional well-being? It doesn't have to be super, super lofty, but even in a small way, what is your vision in that way?
The first thing that came into my mind to respond to this question is really related to what is my purpose. That is to create a space where people can breathe, so pause and recharge themselves, and also to share with others, because it's so rich when we pause, we do introspection, we experience our life, and we share this with others, so that again it doesn't stop with us, with our experience, but it goes beyond. So the vision is to create those spaces in the hospitals that will nourish the dynamic between physicians, nurses, among them, and with colleagues, and also with patients, but also at university and everywhere, right? And this is something that also I learned from the research that we have done at Brown, because one of the things that the participants said to us that was helpful for our program was to hear that other physicians and nurses were having the same struggles, the same difficulties. And so normalizing those difficulties was already helpful for them, because they realized that they are not the only ones struggling with that. And so for this, I say that I really would like to help building spaces where people can breathe and share.
Well, it's clear that you've already taken great strides toward converting that vision into reality. Thank you for sharing. Is there anything else you'd like to mention before we finish?
Certainly, I'm very grateful for you for this program, because it allows people to do what I just said. So to pause and to listen to and to share our experience, and that is so rich. It can really provide relief, but it can provide an encouragement to go forward and to continue to do our work and our life. So yeah, I'm really, really helpful for that, and I'm really grateful for that. Thank you, Mick.
And thank you for your generosity in this podcast interview, but also just the work that you do. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. We will include a summary of today's podcast and links to Dr. Lia Antico in the show notes. I'd like to conclude by sharing another practical exercise to help you flourish. Take a few minutes just to sit or stand comfortably with your eyes closed or open. Extend to yourself the ability to just be present here. Given the conversation we had with Dr. Antico, I'd like to invite you to bring into your awareness and contemplate on those two aspects of our humanity, empathy and compassion, both essential to our work in medicine, We could say that empathy is the substrate of our ability to connect with the experience of others, and that compassion can be thought of as the action we can then choose to take to relieve suffering. Dr. Antico brought us to the sense of these root words underlying empathy in the emotions, in the pathos, in the suffering. Just feel into that, our ability to just resonate when we're facing someone or something that's having difficulty. Compassion, calm with pathos, with the emotion, with the suffering. Building a bridge between our ability to resonate and take action, perhaps bringing to mind one small piece of suffering you or someone close to you has been struggling with, and noticing the natural arising of this desire to do something about it. I hope that you found this podcast and this very simple exercise useful to you. I look forward to having you join us for our next episode of Flourishing in Medicine, From Surviving to Thriving. If you'd like to learn more about EmPro, please visit www.myempro.com. If you'd like to learn more about EmPro's peer support programs, please visit www.myempro.com/peer-support. If you're a physician or a medical student in need of urgent support, consider calling the Physician Support Line at 1-888-409-0141. This support line provides a safe space to discuss immediate life stressors with a colleague. For information about me and my work, please visit www.mickkrasnermd.com or www.mindfulpracticeinmedicine.com. See you next time.